Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of Peak Secrets from the New Science of Expertise by Ericsson. Is it true that practice makes perfect? There's a widespread belief that great athletes are genetically predisposed. As Professor Ericsson has spent 30 years pondering this, he is an expert. Peak debunks the myth of natural prodigies and reveals that we can make significant progress with the right kind of practice. It's not about how many times you practice, but how well you practice. I know what you're thinking, hold on a second. Is there anyone who hasn't heard of Usain Bolt, Eliud Kipchoge, Simone Biles, and Michael Phelps? It is safe to say that Michael Phelps was born with hyperextended joints, which contribute to his explosive kick. There's no denying that heredity plays a role, especially when it comes to things like height or other measurable attributes. A 6-foot woman, for example, would be unable to compete at the highest levels of elite gymnastics. While genes play a role, there is a lot more to being a high achiever than simply having good genes. While good genes and natural ability won't get us there, this short summary shows that there are no shortcuts to success. In addition, putting in the time and effort, as well as using the right methods of practice, will help us achieve our full potential. When it comes to becoming an expert, it's all about perseverance and discipline. The amount of practice time you devote to your sport matters. It's not enough to set aside time to practice, you must also commit sufficient time and remain disciplined in your efforts. The researchers at Ericsson wanted to know what separates great musicians from those who are merely good. Is it a matter of innate talent or practice time? At the Berlin University of Arts, they studied a group of violinists and divided them into 3 groups: good, better, and best. There was a big difference in practice time between these 2 groups. Good violinists had practiced a total of 3,420 hours by the time they were 18. Those who were the best, on the other hand, had clocked up over 7,410 hours of practice. The quality of practice, not just the quantity, was critical in determining the best violinists. The best violinists were those who had clear objectives, worked hard, sought feedback, and made quick adjustments. Another well-known case in point is that of NBA All-Star Ray Allen, who many believe was gifted at birth. Allen has a different opinion. When people tell Allen that he was born with a beautiful jump shot, he responds by pointing out that he has worked hard for it. Anyone on his team, he claims, will say if pressed, that he is the one who works the most on his three-point shooting. As a matter of fact, Allen's high school basketball coach will tell you that his jump shot wasn't any better than his teammates. Allen, on the other hand, honed his technique to the point where it looks so effortless that people assume he was born with it. In addition to quantity, it's also important to pay attention to the quality. It's not enough to just go through the motions when it comes to practicing something for 10,000 hours. As a rule of thumb, 10,000 hours of practice can be beneficial, but only if it's the right kind of training. Deliberate practice is a term used to describe this style of training. The ability of an elderly person to drive is markedly different from that of someone much younger. Because the average person who has been driving for 20 years is no better than the average person who has been driving for 5 years, it's likely that you haven't. Not all drivers are better because they've been behind the wheel longer. Once you've reached a certain level, it's no longer about practicing the same thing over and over again. Over and over again practicing the same technique won't improve our overall performance once we've mastered the fundamentals. As a result, if we want to avoid stagnation, we must prioritize deliberate practice. Our comfort zone is stretched when we put in the work. So, how do we get started with the practice of deliberate intent? Let's say your goal is to improve your tennis game. A good place to start is by establishing measurable goals for each practice. You wouldn't just decide to play for an hour a day. In place of this, the goal is to be very specific and goal-oriented. Try to hit at least 50 balls over the net in a single session. If you can't finish it in a single day, practice as much as you can until you do. Because deliberate practice requires intense focus, the next step is to ensure that we are undisturbed and undisturbed. Thirdly, feedback is the most important aspect of success. Experts and mentors are needed by experts. Consequently, seek out the assistance of a professional who can point out your strengths and weaknesses and help you improve your performance. Last but not least, you have to put in the work. And don't forget that going beyond our comfort zone isn't supposed to be easy. In order to do this, we must step out of our comfort zone and accept the challenges that await us. We have the ability to alter the structure and function of our own brains. For many years, scientists assumed that our brain circuitry was predetermined and that our abilities were based on that circuitry. But since the 1990s, Researchers have come to realize that our minds are more adaptable than we previously thought. We have a lot of control over what our brains are capable of accomplishing. Taxi drivers in London are a great example of the incredible power of the human brain. A London cab driver is well versed in the city's roadways and is familiar with all of the alternate routes and shortcuts. Cab drivers' brains were studied in 2000 and found to have a larger posterior hippocampus than non-drivers. When it comes to spatial navigation and memory, we rely on the posterior hippocampus. Furthermore, the hippocampi of long-term truckers were the largest. The results of this study showed that cab drivers' brain structures and abilities were altered as a result of the time they spent learning every possible route, new landmarks, and constantly challenging themselves. Developing a conscious practice alters our mentality. Deliberate practice has the power to alter not only our brain structure, but also our cognitive processes. The ability to visualize, remember, and quickly comprehend information is what separates experts from the rest of us. One of the characteristics of experts is their ability to identify and recognize patterns, and this ability to form effective mental representations is an example of this. So, in a sense, experts have a mind's eye for what they do. Alexander Alekhine, for example, was a legendary chess player. He accomplished something remarkable in 1924. At the same time, he faced 26 different chess opponents. He won 16, lost 5, and drew 5 of the 26 games he played. All the moves and countermoves had to be figured out in his head without looking at the board. Incredible skill and aptitude are required to pull off this incredible feat here. Consider what was going on in his head at the time. He had to keep track of 26 chessboards, 832 chess pieces, and 1,664 squares in his mind. As Alekhine could see and remember each chessboard, he was also able to imagine and move all of the chess pieces in his mind. He was able to process complex information and respond quickly because of his ability to form these mental representations. The distinction between the good and the gifted is based on their ability to think in highly developed mental representations. Although it is not a gift, we can all grow and adapt our own abilities to our own unique strengths. We may need to rethink our practice strategy in order to change our brains and develop our minds. Academics and business can benefit from deliberate practice. When it comes to academics and business, practice isn't just about physical prowess, it's also extremely beneficial. Examining university-level physics teaching methods, students were split up into 2 groups. A lecture test learning approach was used by one group. To put what they had learned into practice, the other group had to participate actively in student-led discussions and debates. The latter group did better on the final exam. Rather than emphasizing what students can do with what they've learned, education frequently focuses on what they've learned. Imagining flight training simulators or virtual reality scenarios is a good example. It's all about developing expertise if you look at strategies like moot courts for lawyers or role-playing for salespeople. To ensure that people are less likely to make mistakes when it really matters, it's important to quickly build skills. You'll be able to tell how well you're doing because you'll be getting feedback on how well you're learning. You'll need a mentor in this endeavor. However, not just anyone. Be a better person by learning from the best. To sum it up, in order to improve our knowledge and abilities, we must follow these 3 steps. All 3 of these elements are essential for success. As a reminder, deliberate practice isn't always enjoyable, and we may find ourselves lacking in motivation at times. Routine and structure are important for staying on track, as is relying on the collective energy of the group. When it comes to staying motivated, it's important to keep track of how far you've progressed. Ericsson uses his 30 years of experience in psychology, physiology and the neuroanatomy of extraordinary people to understand how we can outperform others, even if we don't believe that we have a genetic advantage. Moreover, when we outperform others, we also outperform our own expectations. To be the best that you can be, deliberate practice is essential. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.